video you are watching is a compilation of early versions of some of my songs. These versions have different mixing, different instrument tracks, and are generally far less polished. These were never intended to be heard by the public. These are ordered from least to most interesting. Firstly is a slightly earlier version of my cover of Muta Kingdom from Super Mario Land. The mixing is less polished, and the tambourine track had not yet been added. piano track right here was removed, and later replaced with the clavinet. The organ solo had not yet been recorded. The drum track is completely different. The bass line got re-recorded, because I was playing completely wrong notes in a section, and the horns in the chorus were later replaced with the synth. One note about this earlier drum track, not only are the samples themselves different, but my playing is different as well. In the post-chorus section, when I lean on the open hat sound for a little bit, that was done longer in this earlier version, which completely ruined the groove. As to be expected, the mixing is also different. Lastly, and most interestingly, we have the redial cover, featuring J.K. Haza 1, easily the cover I'm the most proud of. This took months to record, and as such had months of slow but sure mixing done to it. At one point in late 2022, however, I accidentally overwrote the project for the song, so all I had was a temporary mix left. This mix was missing the drum track, guitar chords and tambourine, but also had completely different bass line and guitar solo recordings, alongside a synth solo. This synth solo was intended only as a placeholder, with the final one to be recorded at a later date. Eventually, I found a backup of the first half dozen or so tracks, the two pianos, the flute and sax leads, and the synth strings. Me and J.K. Haza 1 had a choice to make. Do we slap the drum track on the nearly complete mix, or do we go back, lose the additional tracks, but rebuild everything? We ultimately decided to go back and redo the final few tracks, leaving an abandoned alternate mix. Interesting facts: the guitar solo heard was recorded using the Taylor electroacoustic guitar, the guitar used for the chords in the final. The solo in the final was recorded using a Gretsch solid body electric instead. I also made the choice to omit a synth solo, so as to keep the form consistent. I actually just did a rough cut of the multi-track to skip that section. You can sort of hear it in the final, but I tried to use a drum crash to obscure it. Also, while the final's percussion was the drum kit, tambourine and maracas, this earlier version would have used egg shakers instead, and they were played worse and sounded horrible. Looking back, I'm very glad we decided to abandon this,